What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about ARPA-H. And so ARPA-H is something that has been taken up by the Energy and Commerce Committee and Senate Help Committee, which we've heard a lot about today. It's actually not part of the user fee process and that legislative process, but it's a huge priority for many members of Congress and for the President of the United States. And so we felt it would be helpful to provide some background on it. Due to the time, I'll try to go as quickly as possible. And so thank you for your patience and apologies if I'm talking too quickly. But this is what I'll do is just kind of give a background on what ARPA-H actually is, talk about the fact that it is very interesting process, I should say, it's because it's already been established. But at the same time, we're Help and Energy and Commerce are trying to authorize it. This is a very unique circumstances. So let's just get into it and I'll provide some details on why about these unique circumstances. First, what is ARPA-H? So it is the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. On the next slide, you can see it is a major, next slide, if possible, thank you. It is a major priority of President Biden. He has been talking about ARPA-H. He talked about it in the campaign. He talked about it in Congress, many addresses to Congress. He talks about it constantly at the White House. It is an idea that it's really a priority for him, but it's actually one that has been considered by Republican administrations too. So it is a bipartisan idea. So with that, on the next slide, we can get into what ARPA-H actually is. There's this, basically the proponents of ARPA-H believe the fundamental research at NIH that has been put forward, as well as the biopharmaceutical industry, they've created immense innovation in our country. But there's a critical gap. And so basically there are some ideas that are just not pursued in that the risks are too high, the costs are too large, it's just going to take too long. And so there's this gap that needs to be filled. And that's where this ARPA-H agency will come in, is to try to fill that idea, to basically de-risk these innovations, de-risk these questions so that we can move forward and solve challenges, the immense challenges that revolve, still involved in rare disease, as well as broader than rare disease and cancer, Alzheimer's, and other ideas too. On the next slide, ARPA-H, I'll give you another acronym. There's DARPA. So ARPA-H is actually based on and will be based on DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It is basically an agency that was created and related to the Defense Department and trying to help basically with national defense, national security, but innovations there have pervaded into other parts of our economy and other parts of our world and society, in that they have been critical. They haven't created them, but they've been critical to leading us to the innovations that led to the internet, to GPS, and self-driving cars, which we're on the cusp of. It has been very successful. And so the sense is, and the belief is, let's take the learnings from DARPA and try to apply them to healthcare through ARPA-H. On the next slide, we'll go through, in the next slide again, we'll kind of talk through where we are. Basically, ARPA-H is established and it's funded. In the omnibus that was just passed in March, because of how big a priority is for the president, and it's a big priority for Congress too. There are Democrats and Republicans who are strong believers in this. They actually provided money in the omnibus to basically fund and create ARPA-H. And so with that, there were some requirements along with it too. It's only a couple pages in a 2,000-page bill, but in those 2 pages are authority that actually are enabling the administration to move forward. So first is it provides $1 billion, which is a lot of money. And I think the administration wants more, others want more for it, but $1 billion is a good start to basically hire personnel and to start moving forward with the agency. Another requirement is they have to appoint a director. And this is going to be one of the most critical pieces to ARPA-H, is this first director, not only because this is, there are gaps that have been identified where we want this agency to move forward as quickly as possible, but also just for the agency itself, that first director, she or he will be really helpful and really important to setting precedent to how this agency will actually work. As part of those requirements as well, on the next slide, we can get into it. Basically what it did is it said within 30 days, Secretary Becerra had to make a few decisions. And those decisions, and the really critical one, is basically where it would sit and how the agency would work from a reporting standpoint. So as we've already discussed, the director of ARPA-H will be appointed by the president. So that's set forth in statute. But there were questions on where it would be in just at HHS, or would it be sent to NIH? And what the decision that Becerra made is that basically the HHS secretary, the ARPA-H director, will report to that HHS secretary, but it will actually reside within NIH. The reason why they did that is that basically there are just a lot of administrative processes, whether it's human resources or payroll or general counsel or other administrative functions, where as you're trying to establish a wholly new agency, they thought it would be helpful to put it there to enable it to move faster in that regard. That said, it will be physically separate from NIH. So the new agency is not going to be located there. And then another important element is that this ARPA-H will not report into the director of NIH. She or he, when they get chosen by President Biden, will report to the HHS secretary under current law. On the next slide, we can get into basically where they are now. The administration is moving very quickly to establish this agency. So they have a team that is basically setting forth that operational structure. And what they're trying to do is set that up as quickly as possible so that it's as ready as possible when President Biden basically selects that first director. So they're moving forward expeditiously in that regard. There's $1 billion ready, but they have to do a lot of work just from a processes operation standpoint before we get to the point of hiring program managers, which we can talk more about in a later time. Don't have time now, but that will really be critical appointments to basically leading initiatives, putting forward teams to move forward to solve these immense challenges that are before us. But they're getting there, they're moving forward. And so it's established. On the next slide, though, let's talk about where Congress is. So in Congress, as I said, ARPA-H, we can go to the next slide. ARPA-H is already established, but at the same time, the authorizing committees, Energy and Commerce Committee and Senate Help, they're still trying to figure out and set up guardrails and set up basically authorizing legislation for the agency. This is pretty unprecedented, where you already have something set up and then you're coming after the fact to do it. But this is a very important priority, as we talked about for the president. It's also really important for Congress. Chair Eshoo at the Energy and Commerce Committee, she's the chair of the Health Subcommittee there, as we've heard. She's leading HR 5585, which is the House product that just passed Energy and Commerce Committee last week on a strong bipartisan vote that would enable and set direction for ARPA-H. Importantly, it would say that ARPA-H should not be within NIH and should not should be appointed to HHS. That's different from where it is now, as we just talked about. And so that could have consequences as we move forward, should that be the direction that Congress and the president decide to go. And then we have on the help side, we have Senators Murray and Burr have basically launched S3819, and that is the Senate basically companion to HR 5585. Now it is different; it's a different bill, but it would include ARPA-H within NIH, and if you haven't, that is a major issue, as we'll talk about in a second, and one of the major issues that's still to be decided. But it is moving forward. It actually passed as part of the Prevent Pandemics Act on March 15th. So it's part of that overall package. And so kind of where we are now on the next slide, I can walk through it quickly, is where do we go from the authorizing perspective? One of the biggest decisions, and probably the last decision that will be made before this is signed by the president, is whether ARPA-H is included at NIH. There are those on this question that feel incredibly strong, have incredibly strong opinions, because some believe that it just is not in line with the basic research that NIH is under NIH remit. And so therefore, it would hurt the ability of Rph to be successful to be located there. Others disagree and believe that they need to be with NIH in order to enable those administrative processes that we've talked about. And they believe that's a better place. The physical location of Rph is also a really major issue as well. Should it be located on the campus of NIH? Should it be located in DC? Should it be located somewhere else around our country? And that has become a major issue too. I think it's one where, interestingly, if you talk to folks who really know Rph and how DARPA works, there aren't actually going to be that many people employed by Rph. A lot of the money is going to be sent out so to enable just universities or private industry or others to do work. But it's been a big issue that people have talked about. As with any issue, the funding level always is a big issue, no matter if it's $1 million or it's $1 billion or $1 trillion. But the funding level is one that is a high prominence here. $1 billion has already been appropriated, but there are different bills and different thoughts that basically $6 billion is where we should be. That's kind of where the administration is north of that. We'll just have to see how that comes forward. And then let's get into some of the engagement with the federal government. That's an issue that has been talked about a lot, whether it's with FDA or CMS or NIH. That's an issue that still needs to be resolved, but I think the bills are moving in a good direction there to ensure that there is that collaboration that is so important. And then engagement with patients. Engagement with patients, whether it should be required or not, whether there should be an advisory board or others. That is a topic that, of course, is very important. We just saw that as part of the discussion related to the user fee and what will ride there. Broader, it's just something we believe as community with FDA is incredibly important. It's important here too. The bills that are now standing before Congress that are now being considered, they don't include that requirement. And I think that's something that as the bills move forward and they come together and try to reconcile, it's one that I think we'll want to have further input and to ensure that collaboration with patients is required. It's thought that those program managers that I mentioned earlier will be able to do that, but it's always good to have a statutory direction to ensure that happens. And then finally, the legislative pathway, the clarity is not there. It's not something that is a must pass like the user fee legislation that we've discussed throughout this call. But it is one where there are strong advocates in Congress who want to get this done. And so they'll be looking for ways to move this forward, either standalone or possibly coupled with vehicles like you see with the Prevent Pandemics Act that I mentioned earlier. And so that'll be bear watching over the next few months. So with that, I'll close. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.